Hey guys, this is Pastor Mac and Pastor John, and we're here today on the New Day podcast to address what has just happened in our nation and the death of Charlie Kirk. Wanted to be able to give some pastoral insight, not to answer all the questions, but to help focus us on God's word and what it means for us at difficult times like this as a nation, as believers within a nation. With that, I kind of want to pass things to John. So can you give us an overview, just like what's happened, where are we at?
Yeah, so obviously we all saw the news yesterday where Charlie Kirk, who's very well known, very popular conservative political activist, who's kind of known for his kind of dialogue style on different issues, was assassinated at a rally that he was doing at a university in Utah. And obviously it's just a really tragic situation, I think. So he's known for being a well-known conservative voice, very, a leading one. He's also a vocal, outspoken Christian. So I think that matters for us, and a lot of people are feeling that. At this moment, the killer is still at large. And so I think that's an important detail because we don't know exactly the motive yet. And I think once that comes out, or the reason why this person acted in this way, that's going to probably inform us a lot in this. But we know for sure the motive was hate, regardless of what it is, and evil. But that's an important detail. That person is still at large. But from what we know, Charlie was just a very faithful follower of Jesus. And he was outspoken about that. He was a strong family man, has a wife and 2 kids that now don't have their husband and father, which we are grieving. And so, but it's an assassination. Like, he was assassinated. He's a public figure. He means a lot to a lot of people. He represented a lot. And so people are processing that. And we want to speak to that just a little bit today.
Yeah, definitely. And, Charlie was such a young person, 31 years old, had been doing what he was doing for 10 years. And obviously with that, there's going to be controversy in kind of embracing the things that he was embracing, but he was a significant figure. Why is this such a big deal? Like, what is it about this that makes there are these moments where everyone kind of stops and just kind of knows something different just happened here?
Yeah, I think it actually speaks. I think there's 2 things. I think there's like the kind of Christian spiritual perspective of, obviously, this really matters because he is an image bearer of God, created in the image of God. Anytime anybody dies or is assassinated or murdered, it's a big deal. Obviously, it's not God's heart, and so it matters because first and foremost, he's a human, created by God in the image of God. He's a Christian, a follower of Jesus, also a family man. So it's just a tragedy in that sense. But I think in a bigger picture, I think in a way it speaks to our moment. It's a big deal because, like it or not, we live in a time where people can develop massive followings, and especially with social media and the internet, which Charlie had, and those people and those figures begin to represent ideas, or things like that. So, Charlie Kirk represents, in a lot of ways, political conservatism in America. He represents that to people. He's a figure, right? And so when somebody like that is attacked, people will think, oh, this political conservatism in America is being attacked.
Right.
He's also a Christian, an outspoken Christian. And so when someone like this is assassinated, he, in some ways, only Jesus represents Christianity, but any Christian to some degree represents Christ, right?
Right.
And so he represents, in some ways, Christianity in America, right? So when he's attacked, there's a sense of is Christianity in America being attacked? And once again, the motive will play out in terms of how we interpret that, but these people represent these things. And so and like it or not, it creates an ideological conversation. And so regardless of what side you're on. And so it's these people, big figures today represent things. When those people are attacked, it's as if not just the person is being attacked, because we talked about him being an image bearer, but the idea of the thing they represent is being attacked. And then lastly, I think it's really important because I think it just reminds us of the reality of evil. These things just remind us of these theological, biblical realities. We're always talking about evil. And then once again, depending on what the motive of this was it somebody who, hated Christianity, if that is the motive of the shooter that's still at large, then it's okay, truth was being literally attacked, in an evil way, demonically, you name it. And so like it just reminds us that like there's a real evil in the world that exists that we have to be mindful of. And then also one thing I'll just add is I think this just hit a lot of people. And so regardless of kind of what it represents, it just hit a lot of people. And I was getting a lot of texts from people who they just deeply felt this. And so because of that, it matters to us, and we want to, be mindful of it as Christians and specifically speak to it as pastors.
Yeah, I think that to kind of echo that, to me, some of the significance isn't just who it was where it was and what he was doing, Exactly. So you look at in the realm of political figures, both on the left and the right, like there are different people that do different things. And what was always fascinating for me as kind of a high, I wasn't like a deep Charlie Kirk follower, but very aware of who he was the conversational side of what he did. Like the idea was, let's intentionally find two people who disagree with each other on a subject matter and sit down and have a long-form conversation about an issue. And I've always kind of felt that the biggest shift that I've seen culturally is the way that we have political, religious, cultural discourse. In many ways, it's kind of broken down. And so to have somebody who their thing was sitting down and having conversations, and both sides might say things that the other people don't like, but we're going to do this, and there's value in that. I think, it being on a college campus at one of these kind of events, my heart breaks for all of the college students there who watched somebody get killed in front of them, and it's horrible. Anytime something like that happens, like you realize that. And then, it was in the middle of the conversation. Like he's literally having a conversation. Somebody's asking him questions, challenging about different ideas, trying to engage in dialogue. And so, it's a big deal because of all those things. And I think that's kind of what makes it a little different, and you kind of sense that as soon as it happened. There's been an increase in political violence in recent years in our country, but this one felt different, and you could feel the mood because of who it was, what he was doing, where it was taking place. In many ways, I think that's how you can feel the evil within that. And so then, at least for you, John, when you found out the news, where were you, and what was your reaction?
Yeah, I was working at a cafe that I often go to, and I think I saw someone share it on Instagram, like on a story. And so my first reaction, because the first thing I heard was he had been shot at an event. So he's at an event, he was shot. And so if I'm being very honest, my first thought was I just kind of assumed he'd be okay.
Right.
I think that was my first reaction, was he got shot. I mean, remember President Trump, there was an assassination attempt on him, and I remember that, but he was okay. And so my first thought is like he was going to be okay. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a story. It's kind of another thing. And to be honest with you, man, whenever I found out that he didn't make it, I was just shocked. I mean, I just, I guess I just assumed he'd be okay. And so, I mean, I was just kind of shocked. And that's when I kind of felt like, if I'm being honest, and this is just an honest gut reaction, when I found out that he didn't make it, my first thought was a legend was born. Like, I'm just being honest. It just reminded me of how these things develop. And I got this sense of like, oh man, this guy's clips are going to forever be, he's going to become like a legend of the day in a sense. Right. And so part of me is just like, oh, this is how these things happen. There's something about kind of being assassinated or losing your life in this way that to some degree, whatever you stand for seems to kind of you end up deeply embodying whatever you were really speaking about, so that just kind of went through my mind. Obviously next is like feeling for his family. That's where I always go there first. It's like, okay, there's like the political ideas and all that kind of stuff, but just his family. And to be very transparent, I mean, like, I thought about my late wife, Halsey, because everyone's like, oh, his wife and his kids, and they're going to bed without a father. And I'm just like, that's my family. So just on a personal level, I was just reminded of like my kids now go to bed in the same way without a mother because my wife lost her life to cancer. And so like, in a sense, just like, oh, this is just a thing, like a very hard, deep thing that people go through. I really felt for them a lot, and what she's going through and the kids and how she's feeling about the kids, because I think about my kids. And so for me, it was a very personal reaction in that, a lot of personal empathy. Another thought I had was, politics is not as quiet as I thought. I literally almost posted the other day that politics had seemed quieter to me. Like even, and once again, maybe I'm just way out of it. I feel like even the level of intensity with Trump, things have chilled out a little bit in my opinion. I might be wrong on that, just my perspective. Maybe I haven't followed all political news, so I have no idea. There's always something going on, but not as intense. And it just reminded me that the ideological, the culture war rages on. Like we are in a culture war. It's not like I guess it's some ways a physical war because someone just lost their life, but there's just a war of ideas, and there's a hatred and a fighting of different ideas in our nation that are happening, and that war rages on. And then I think the big thing, the most important thing that my mind eventually settled on was just the ultimate like spiritual war that we're in, because moments of this level of evil or hatred, I think just make it undeniable the spiritual evil that exists. I think when you see, it's the same way like when you look at creation and you're thinking like there's some things that are just so massive that it's like this didn't just happen from a purely physical standpoint. I think there's a level of evil that happens and manifests that it's almost like this is not just a human being, that it feels deeply spiritual. And so to me, it just reminds me of because people always go to like the culture war, or they go to like the politics, because what a lot of people are going to say about this, and this is going back to kind of what this is like, and some of the reactions we'll talk about here in a second, is like it's been stated in a couple of reports I've read that like a few minutes before this, he was talking about the importance of like freedom of guns, of Americans being able to have guns, And then shortly thereafter, he's like assassinated. And so there's a lot of like now people that are saying things like, well, this is horrific and demonic, right. But there are people saying, well, that's what you get.
Right,
even
right,
saying
right.
that, I just feel like it's horrible.
Right.
To say that. But the fact that people can say some of those things to me is like I go to like, that's not just like a heated political opinion. Right. That's a spiritual blindness and an evil that it in a weird way doesn't even make sense in the natural why a human would go there or even be compelled to say that. Even if you didn't like somebody, why would you say that? So I think for me, it just like reminded me that like my initial reaction was like, this is also deeply spiritual. And I think in the days to come, God's going to continue to kind of reveal whatever he wants to reveal through this. But what about you, man? What was your reaction when you heard it? You're a totally different person. Like, what's going through your mind?
Well, I mean, I was eating lunch, and I just sat down with my Whataburger, and I was in my office, and normally when I'm kind of eating by myself in my office, I'll pull up some news and a YouTube video or something and just kind of relax. And so I'd opened up and saw on the news that he had been shot, and initially it's shock, like no way. And then you do the thing where you're trying to figure out like what is this, is he okay, is it not? And it's so interesting where you get your news from now. So I'm on the big ones, Fox, CNN, like trying to figure things out, but then also like TMZ. And
getting the real talk.
I mean, TMZ has like broken so many things the last few years. So I'm there, and honestly, this is kind of, we can always talk about how we process things moving forward, but in many ways, in the quest to seek, I wish I hadn't, because it was impossible once you kind of saw video of what happened to go, yeah, he's going to be okay. And
can I take a real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want you to come back to that. I had a couple friends that texted me, and they said, oh my gosh, I just saw what happened. I saw the video. I said, oh, I haven't seen it yet. They said, do not watch it.
Right.
Do not watch it. And so then I actually started texting people that I know and care about that I thought might. I said, do not watch it. Some already had.
Right.
But that's one thing, it's an important thing, Mac, because like that's another reason why this matters, is because we can see these things now.
Right.
Like back in the day when people were assassinated, like you can see the footage. And so that's a really good point. I just want to note that. As people are watching this, I would say like, unless you feel, I don't think you should watch it if you haven't. I've not seen it. I'm trying not to see it,
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a great point, man.
So it was one of those things.
So you saw it. Yeah.
I did. And once you see it, my immediate reaction was, there's no way he survived. And So at that point, you're just waiting on confirmation for the thing that you know. And so for me, like my immediate grief wasn't just that he had died. It was, or that we're just waiting for the inevitable, you know. Even when there were reports like, well, they're stabilizing at the hospital. I'm like, I don't know, guys.
Yeah.
But also I just kind of grieved for our nation. Like this, you know, I'm looking at my kids. I've got 4 kids, and there's a part of me that in my, you know, I love Jesus and I want to go to heaven, but I also love living and I love being here, and I'm trying to build something for my kids, and I don't want my kids to live in a world where this is the reality. How do we look at them and explain to them these kinds of tragedies? And it came on a day, to me, it was almost like, you know, when things just start piling on, like you wake up, and yesterday was already in the news like a crazy day. You turn on the news and you see that, you know, there's Russian kamikaze drones incurring into Poland, challenging the NATO alliance, and you're like, whoa, is this it? Is everything globally about to go off? And then you see continued tension with Israel and Qatar and Hamas, and you know, it's like a heavy day. And then you look at this and you see a young political figure at a rally engaging in conversation with people being killed in the middle of things. And so I don't know, I was just filled with sadness, just going, it's one of those things where the only thing you can say is just like, Lord, come quickly. I don't like where we are culturally. Like I don't like that this is where we are, that these are the things that we have to worry about. And I think it's okay to be sad that this is the reality that we have or that we live in. Which then I think, you know, leads us to this question, since we're all watching this, like, how do we respond? Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah. Man, for some reason I was thinking about this, and one of the things I'm always trying to do in this season is like, okay, like, God, where in your word can we go to feel like your heart in this, you know? And so I feel like God put on my heart the story of Jesus and Lazarus. So I literally brought my Bible. I just want to kind of open it up and just kind of, you know, it says, when Jesus saw her weeping, now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved, and in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And then, of course, you know, in John 11:35, Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible. Obviously, you know, Mary comes, her brother has died, and she comes to him, and she has this sense of like, well, Jesus, if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. And I just think it's always beautiful how, like, Jesus will raise him. We see that in the story. That's where the miracle comes from. But before he does that, he weeps. And so that's just a beautiful image of the humanity of Jesus. And so I think it is important to ask how we respond to this, and we're going to talk about that. But even just like before there's like a response or doing something, like before you react, you always feel the emotions. That's a really interesting thing. Like you're always going to feel the emotions first. And so I think it's important to not rush past that. And so I think as a follower of Jesus, trying to be like Jesus and filled with his spirit, I think the first thing that we do is we grieve and we lament, and then we hope. You know, we grieve and lament, and then we hope. And obviously, you know, a certain kind of prayer is a part of that grieving. And so I think it's important. Like we say the word prayer a lot, but there's different kinds of prayers. You know, prayers where we're just praising God. There's prayers where we're asking for provision. There's prayers where we're praying for the people, for spiritual realities to change, or there's just prayers of like, God, this is hard and I'm just giving this to you. And so I think in this moment when Jesus weeps, it's beautiful because we see like the humanity of Jesus, because obviously we believe like the incarnation, that Christ is like fully God and fully man, like 100% both. That's an important theological concept. He's not 50% man, 50% God. He's all of everything in that. And in the same way, though we are not God, we are filled with the Spirit of God. And so in a similar way, like we are humans, but also filled with his Spirit. And so like there's a humanity to us that feels these things. And Jesus represents that, you know, when he's weeping here in this moment. And so I think the way that we process it is I think that we make sure that we grieve and lament. Because imagine Jesus could have shown up in this moment like a lot of kind of hyper spiritual people do. People that are immature spiritually, but they try to sound mature, where they're like, why are you crying?
Yeah, I already know what I'm here to do.
I'm here.
So,
You know, why you don't trust me? You know, like he could have shown up just like
good.
guns blazing and just like rebuking them for that. And in a weird way, when you look at the Bible, it's like Jesus is always rebuking the people that won't show emotion.
Right.
Like the Pharisees who were kind of,
right.
You know, whoa, don't wipe his feet. You know, don't let the kids come. You know, nothing emotional, meaningful, deep at all. And I just think this verse, rightfully so, is so powerful because it reminds us that Jesus, like, wept. But once again, so we grieve and we lament this. Like we should grieve and lament that a Christian brother died in this way. That a wife and family go to bed without their beloved, you know, like leader and protector and provider today. We should grieve that a lot of people in our nation who would obviously Christians as followers of Jesus, but even our brothers and sisters that would say that they're conservative feel fearful today. We should grieve that, you know. And so like that's important, but then we hope. And I think that's important. Like how do we process, like in the midst of our grief, we hope. And so, you know, there's like death and there's resurrection. And so I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, it's wrong to, you know, it's wrong to like overlook the emotional part of it and just like, we'll just trust God type of thing.
Right.
But it is wrong. And it's important to hear that. It is wrong to like grieve without hope, as Paul says, right? We grieve, but we don't grieve as those without hope. And so I think that the way we process all emotions is we grieve, we feel it, but then we start looking to God and hope. And what I think that means practically, because that can be like pastor speak, we just hope, you know. I think what that practically looks like is number one, saying, God, this is an opportunity to trust you.
Yeah.
And then number two, it's also, God, you work all things together for good. And so I think what hope means is you are already, as much as you can, looking to the light and the goodness that God could bring out of this in our own life. And then lastly, kind of, God, what are you speaking to us through this? You know, God is always speaking. He's always working things together for good. Doesn't mean you have to doesn't mean you have to even feel it all the time, but it means that you're looking for it and faithful because like you believe in like the hope that we have and how God brings, you know, good out of these things. So yeah, I think how do we feel these emotions? It's like, man, like grieve, lament, but then, you know, move to hope. Grieve, lament, move to hope.
Yeah, no, to kind of piggyback off of that, I think, you know, two scriptures that have really been on my mind the last, you know, 12 hours or almost 24 hours now that I think about it, you know, is Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers.
Yes.
Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. That we have to understand that people go through real suffering and pain, and God sees that suffering and pain. Yeah. But then I'm also reminded, you know, Ephesians 6:12, that our battle is not against flesh and blood. Yeah. They're spiritual forces of darkness at work in this world. Yeah. And for us as Christians, this is, I think, the challenge. Regardless of where we stand in our political ideology, as followers of Christ, we are called to mourn with people that mourn. And not to deflect and to push it, well, what about this-ism, you know, what about-ism? No, is in the moment to be still and to reflect. The passage that you talk about, like Jesus knows that he's the answer and he plans to fix their problem, but he still sits in their suffering and weeps with them.
That's deep.
And the easiest way to find, like the easiest path to peace is the most difficult one, because it requires us to sit and empathize with people that we might not even agree with, you know, and to feel that pain and suffering. And hopefully when we feel the weight of that pain and suffering, it helps us to apply that to other situations. And so this is not to say that what happened yesterday was the only pain and suffering in the world. I look at the headlines yesterday in yesterday's news, and like I said, you look at what happened in Poland yesterday. Well, first of all, there's an ongoing war in, you know, Ukraine, and then you have people on another side of Poland with airports shut down and people sheltering in place. And there was just a part of me that just, you know, when I was reading that news, it's like, I don't know what that's like right now, but as a parent, what would it feel like to have to rush my kids into a room with fear. The closest thing I can think of is when we've gone through natural disasters and storms, and like you don't know what's going to happen with floodwaters, with tornadoes or hurricanes, and there's that fear, and that makes me empathize. Like I don't know, like I don't know what you went through exactly, but I'm trying to feel, and that putting myself in your position and weeping with those who are weeping, like that is a God honoring process that informs what comes out of our mouth next. And oftentimes people say things because they haven't taken the time to stop and mourn with people, to weep with people, to empathize and feel where people are. And so, we're in this society, we're with social media, we're all trying to be the first to reply to something and to have some deep and profound thought. And I don't know about you, but I was tempted as well. I started typing up like, this is what my post is going to be. And it was very eloquent. And I was sitting there looking at it and I said, you don't need to be first. You need to sit and feel. And honestly, I went to community group last night, like heavy. And what my post was then was very, very heavy. And after being in community with people and praying with another dad who was like, I don't know how to talk to my kids about this, my spirit was lifted up. And the way that I respond, because I took the time to wait, is very different now than what it would have been, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours removed from watching somebody die, you know? Yeah. So I don't know. That's for me how I look at those things. So beyond us, I think our church, our congregation, and other people that are watching this, so then how are we supposed to respond? Yeah. Like, what are we supposed to do? It's the next day. What is the world supposed to look like after, a political assassination for believers? And even if you're not, like, what do you do? So, John, what do you think?
So some thoughts on that are, this is, I think, maybe the most important part. I think, maybe the greatest temptation to kind of move the wrong direction in this. I think the first thing I wrote was like, stay missional, not political. I love 2 Timothy chapter 2, where Paul says, and what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, and trust of faithful people who will be able to teach others also. Share in sufferings as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No soldier gets entangled in civilian pursuits, since his aim is to please the one who enlisted him. And that phrase, don't get involved in civilian pursuits, basically what Paul is telling Timothy, who's like his young, like a pastor that he's mentoring, is basically, hey, I sent you here to preach the gospel and to make disciples, and stay on that mission. Right. Don't get distracted. Like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that for Christians, and if you're not a Christian, this doesn't apply to you, but if you are a follower of Jesus, the most important thing in this is to stay missional, meaning on the mission of Jesus, because the political draw in this will be so deep and heavy. Right. And I'm not saying politics don't matter, and I'm not saying that there are not issues that matter, but I'm saying that the ultimate thing is staying on the mission of Jesus. But what you're going to hear on the news and from so many influencers is not going to be stay on the mission of Jesus. Right. And when this becomes merely a political or human thing, what you will notice is it just becomes about war. It's about like, okay, we got to fight the bad people, we're the good people, as opposed to like all of us are broken, sinful, and fallen. And we are only good in the sense of Christ has saved us and forgiven us and put a new spirit within us. And now we are humbly offering that gospel to other people, not people that we're better than, right? But people that can receive the same salvation and hope that we have, right? But that doesn't come from us ultimately, right? Right. So I just think that the political, like everyone watching this or listening to this needs to know that because of this, the political discourse is going to ramp up a lot in the next coming weeks because of this. Right. And we need to be on guard against that. Once again, not that certain conversations don't matter, but that like at the end of the day, our hope for these things to not happen is that like Christ is going to return. Yes. Or people are going to be like Christ. Trying to destroy our political enemies is going to create more violence. And so I think the most important thing is like I said, not the politics don't matter, but like the most important thing is to stay on the mission of Jesus. And you're not going to hear that a lot in the news, which is why we're as pastors talking about it, right? Right. Stay on the mission. Another one is stay spiritual. And so you quoted it, but I just want to read it again. Ephesians chapter 6. Finally, be strong in the Lord and all of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against the authorities, which are basically just spiritual opposition, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. And so As Christians, we are physical people, but we also believe, as the Bible teaches, in the spiritual realities that are even more real than this, you know?
Right.
And those things have great implications on earth. And so one of the mistakes that a lot of Christians make is we're just blind to the spiritual, like even Christians, to
Right.
where it's like we're kind of fighting these battles that are happening spiritually, and they're just kind of manifesting on earth.
Right.
And that's why Paul writes this, is because they would have not seen it or they would have forgotten it. And so I think moments like this are a reminder to stay spiritual. I think it's, in some ways, it's easier in these moments because you just, like I said, you feel the depth of like the demonic activity. Like you feel like the weight of the spiritual opposition more easily, but it's kind of a wake-up call to stay spiritual. And so it's like there's a lot of practical things we want to do, which is like, okay, like in a situation like this, okay, if you can help the family or if you can, you know, contribute to a safer society practically, those things are really good. But as Christians, we are on our hands and knees praying that God would bring protection, right? Praying against demonic activity that comes against us.
Yeah.
A couple more things. I think one is stay bold. Charlie Kirk was a outspoken vocal Christian, and like he was, and he seemed very like very genuine in that. There are honestly political figures that they say things about, you know, Jesus or the church or whatever, and you're just like, I just don't know if that's like authentic. I just like with him, you could just tell it was authentic. Like,
Right.
he loved the Lord. Even when he would talk or post things, it was obvious that he kind of understood the Bible and theology and was very just like grounded. And it seems like he lived that out with his family. And so, of course, while you never know the backstory to anybody, he just seemed as solid of a brother in the Lord as can be, you know? And so, like, and listen, you don't have to even agree with someone's all their politics to say that, you know?
Right.
I mean, he really seemed to live that out. And so I think when someone like that is attacked, there's an honest thought about like, well, I don't want that to happen to me, you know?
Right.
But it's like just a reminder to stay bold and just to see that, you know, even when someone dies, once we don't know the motive yet, you know, but like God honors that, you know, like when his saints die, especially in these ways. Right. And so it's stay bold. Like, don't let this like make you fearful, which we have to remind ourselves because we are tempted to be fearful. Then lastly, I think what's important too is like love your enemies.
Right.
Love your, that's a hard thing to hear anytime, but I think if you are trying to love your enemies, I think it's going to keep you in the right mindset, and I think it's going to keep you from returning hate with hate. When you think about it, if the response to violence is more violence, eventually everybody gets killed. Like it's common sense. If it's a life for a life, you know.
Right.
And so I think this is just a reminder to, you know, as Christians, Romans 12. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Yes.
Such a, and that even comes in a part of scripture where Paul is actually talking about the government and a lot of things like more socially. And so like as Christians, we love our enemies. And so like keep that heart. Like that is where we get our confidence that we're not a part of the evil of this world.
Right. Yeah.
Because we can lament all this evil and say it's horrible. And then if we become murderous, if we become selfish, if we dehumanize other people,
right,
then we're not a part of the problem. I mean, we're not part of the solution.
You're part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just important to make sure that like we are like loving our enemies and applying that however it looks.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's almost that's a part of the way the things we say and do in these moments show how easy it is for us to syncretize to what the rest of the world is doing.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, we have to be light. Like if we're not the light, then what?
Yeah.
How dark is the world?
We're in darkness. Yeah.
You know, like that. And so we have to look at these things in their proper context. Our battle isn't against flesh and blood, and this is these moments that we have to do some reflection.
Yeah.
Do you actually believe that our world is spiritual, and that the things that we're seeing have a spiritual backdrop to what's happening, or is everything just in the physical? I feel like there are so many people in church who say that they know that they have there's a spiritual battle, but their actions and attitudes show that they only believe in the physical.
Exactly.
And so we have to take a step back and remember. Not only, what's great about what he says in Ephesians 6? It's not just that Paul puts the battle in its proper context. He gives them what to do which is to put on the armor of God,
Yeah.
which involves faith and salvation and righteousness. By the way, what should we do? Do good, and all these things, which points us back to Christ. It's a war that's already been won. So if you want to have hope in the midst of the things that are going on, put your faith and your hope in Jesus. He has already won the victory. If this is a spiritual battle, then Jesus is the place that you want to go because he's already won. So we don't have to fear. We don't have to be overcome with dread. And the other thing that I would say, it's kind of connected to what we started talking about earlier, is I think that we see Scripture, Romans 12, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. One of the things that we have to do as believers, if we're going to respond well, is protect our mind. Protect what you are consuming. What images are you watching on repeat, and how much time are you spending listening to commentators give you context for how you should feel and respond? Yeah. And it's in moments like these of great crisis where your reading of Scripture, your time of prayer, your time of worship needs to be dialed up. And then the amount of time that you spend listening to podcasters and news anchors and sitting on, X or, Instagram or, whatever it is that you're TikTok, just watching different angles of X, Y, and Z, all that needs to come to a minimum, enough to know what happened and then just let it go. And if you find yourself, in every waking moment, I just need to consume more, then you can see how your heart is actually being oriented towards things of the world rather than things of the Spirit that will renew your mind and fill you up and give you strength and wisdom and guidance. The Holy Spirit. You got to make spiritual deposits in your life. That's what you have to do today. If you haven't prayed, you got to pray. And if you listen to this podcast, which we hope that you do, you should spend more time praying and worshiping and seeking the presence of God than you do listening to us talk about the fact that you should do that, if that makes sense. So, which then kind of leads us to, this last big question. So what is God showing us through this?
Yeah. So I thought about this a little bit because obviously the Lord, speaks to us and instructs us through things that happen in our life. I think one of the big ones, this is just a very sober-minded one, that there is a evil in this world, a very real evil that cannot be reasoned with. And I think we need to be mindful of that. It just is. I think there can be a naive take on things where it's if people just heard more about God or the Bible or heard a positive whatever. I mean, all throughout Scripture, you see there are moments where evil manifests. We have to protect ourselves against it, both spiritually and practically. And so I just feel I think this just reminds us of that. There's a very real evil. This is a real war and battle that we're in. Now, we don't fight back with weapons of war, right? But weapons of love and the Spirit.
Yes.
And so, but it is a war.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes there can be just this naive sense. And I think people that have more of that sense get kind of exposed in this moment. So I just think there is an evil that you just have to know about. This person did this. And then this person did this. And the way that, man, I read some comments, bro.
Come on.
I was on the Chronicle, and every post there was, what broke my heart, there was this evil comments of that's what you get, or people would put memes of people dancing and celebrating, and then the amount of people that were liking it was just evil. And of course you go to those people's profile, and it's par for the course of what you expect, let's be real, pronouns in the bio, type of thing. You're just looking at some of these things, and there are some things that are just so opposed to the ways of God that are just wrong and evil. And we love those people and everybody, but we stand for the truth, and we gladly stand where Christ is and with His Spirit. And so I just think it's important to know that exists, and it's we have to love people, but we also have to be bold and rebuke things that are wrong, and it is wrong to celebrate the death of anybody. It is wrong to do that. It is wrong to celebrate that, especially when somebody was known for standing for the things that he stood for. So that's just that exists. We need to know that God is revealing that to us. I think also this reminds us that this world is not our home, and it's we always say it. And obviously I've experienced a lot in losing my wife, but it's just a reminder this world is not our home, And so you're a follower of Jesus. You can be faithful and love your family and all these kinds of things. And unless the Lord returns, we all die at some point in this life. And to some degree, life doesn't go as we planned or hoped. Bad things happen, hard things happen, physical challenges happen, you lose people. And so it's just like this world is not our home. And so that reminder reminds us ultimately this is not a tragedy. Ultimately, it's like the famous saying, the only thing death can do to the believer is deliver him to Jesus. Like that's really what it does, right?
Yeah.
And so like we have this ultimate hope. This world is not our home. And so in a sense, like it's a tragedy in the moment, but eternally it is not a tragedy, and God is working it together for good. And so this is a moment for us to like proclaim that and to live that out and to hope in that over our feelings or what people are saying. And so, listen, Charlie Kirk seemed like a very faithful, legitimate believer in Jesus. And so what that means is he's with the Lord now. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. That's our hope. And so it's just a reminder that like as bad as things, like the worst thing ever creates the best thing ever. And I think it's just a moment for us to like grieve, but also like really rejoice in the hope that we have, Mac. Like we rejoice in that hope. Because of the hope that we have, in the end, this is not a tragedy. Otherwise it would be,
Right.
If we did not have that hope, then, imagine how we would look. Imagine without Jesus and the hope of eternity, how we look at this thing.
Right.
Imagine what it's like. Imagine what you're thinking. Imagine, but that's not true.
Right.
Because Christ got up from the grave, and because he got up from the grave, we have that hope. And I think even as Christians, we can take that for granted. Because I have that, I think that so deeply in my being, but let's be reminded also a lot of people don't have that hope.
Right.
And we want them to. People don't have, like a lot of people today, the majority of people today are probably waking up watching this without that hope. And what is the secular person thinking? What is the atheist thinking? What is the agnostic thinking, today? And the reality is like they can have this hope as well. So I guess it also reminds us to be bold about our hope and share that hope. So God is speaking to us through this. And I believe that if we will follow him in, once again, not just even this thing, but any hard thing that we go through, God does incredible things to it, and he works it all together for good.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, and ultimately, we see that when our focus is on Christ, then the tragedies, the major events that happen in the world, we don't lose sight of the gospel. Yeah. Like the Great Commission is compelling today, to make disciples of all nations, to always be ready to tell people for the hope that's within you. Like that, there's so much hope that the world needs. And if you don't have Jesus, if you don't have eternal security, and all you do is working for the here and now, how bleak of an outlook that is. Yeah. And so we have to stay focused. I think that's what these things, and not just this, I think every time something major in politics happens that leaves the world unsettled, it is a reminder that there's evil in the world, there's hope, it's in Jesus, and we're called to bring people that hope.
There's hope in the world.
And if the people who have the hope are hopeless, then what are we doing,
Yeah.
And so, it's so easy for us. And this is why, even in what God showed me yesterday, afternoon, evening, like what you put in to your life is so important, because when all I had was the news, then I was filled with despair. When I realized that I had to go lead community group, and I was at the office, I walked into the sanctuary, I kneeled at the altar and spent some time praying, walked over to the piano, sang a little worship, and like once I put that into my spirit, like I was so much more refreshed and better able to navigate how to lead people. And then you get up in the morning, and instead of jumping on and sing with the first thing, like I'm gonna see what the news says. Nope. Turn on some worship music, spend some time praying, get in the Word, get ready. That all of a sudden life starts coming out of you because you've put life in you. And so I think God uses these things to show us why we need him, not just generally, but in every moment by moment, day by day. And that much was just as true when we woke up yesterday morning before Charlie Kirk died. as it was today on this side of it. You need God. This is just what it comes down to. And that's all we can really tell people. Now, here's the big picture when it comes to all of this. We recognize that this is going to be an ever-changing situation as more information comes out, as they find the person that did this. There's going to be a lot. And what we do want to recognize is that there are people in our churches that are grieving, that are hurting, that are scared. And as a church, we are here. Your church family is here for you. Your pastors are here to shepherd and walk you through this. If there are those of you that are wrestling with cynicism, maybe you're cold and detached, and maybe Charlie Kirk wasn't your guy. So, you're wrestling with how to feel empathy for your enemy. Once again, your church family is here for you. Like, we're here to shepherd you and pastor you and walk you through. All of us have heart issues here that only the power of the Spirit of God can minister to. And as we move forward, that's what church is. We get into the ugliness, the messiness of life, and we walk with each other, and we have each other, and that's why the body of Christ is so important. And so the biggest encouragement we can do as we draw things to a close is just to encourage you to run towards the Spirit of God, the light, the church. Allow Christ-centered community to lift you up in this season. And then let's continue to pray for each other and be diligent to keep the Great Commission at the forefront, that we are here to share the hope of Jesus with the hopeless. And I think if we do that, then we'll see God get glory even out of tragedy. And so we thank you guys for dropping in with us for the New Day podcast, and hope to see you this weekend in our services.